Yeah, Syed really demonstrating his range at the various SCG Tour stops. You see him playing aggressive decks a lot of the time, but also recently he had been a proponent of the various prison decks in Modern.
Right. Can't get really more polar opposites than mono red aggro and prison. Zan leading on the Gitu Lava Runner, has a fire up, Fanatical Firebrand. That's going to rumble into the red zone. 2 damage heading Daniel's way.
Yeah, decent start. Obviously, you would prefer to have a 2-mana card on turn 2, but the mono red decks function a lot differently when they have a 1-drop and when they don't.
Jerry, do you want to guess the green cards in Daniel Garmon's Naya Feather list?
I was curious. I would not have... Well, okay, so Collision Colossus makes sense.
Yes. How much sense does Giant Growth make to you, Jerry? +3/+3 for 1 green mana. Maybe the spell I loved more than any other when I first started playing Magic.
Really?
Yeah, I just love Giant Growth. The first competitive constructed deck I ever remember having was an Orcish Lumberjack, Yavimaya Ants Giant Growth deck, which awesome combination, by the way. Go ahead and read those, kids, if you're not familiar with Orcish Lumberjack.
Orcish Lumberjack is nice.
It is. It's not with Yavimaya Ants, though, which has a cumulative upkeep of 2 green mana. I'm sure I sacrificed many forests to pay for that cumulative upkeep.
Oh, I believe it.
Yeah.
So, yeah, Giant Growth, not a card that I would necessarily expect, but Collision Colossus, definitely very nice.
Great in this deck.
With Dreadhorde Arcanist, and then Cindervine's out of the sideboard, which I think is probably a very important card this weekend.
I agree with you. Zan just going to go ahead and play Runaway Steamkin here. Had dealt with the Dreadhorde Arcanist with Wizard's Lightning, so nothing going for Daniel quite yet. And if this deck has a flaw, it's this. It has a hard time keeping a permanent in play. If it's able to do so, those permanents are often dominating. And you're able to generate a lot of advantage very quickly, but it's tough to keep one in play.
There are a lot of protection spells, but mono red aggro just has so many different lightning bolt effects.
Right.
And certainly starting on the draw makes things a little bit more difficult. You don't really have the amount of time that you would want to play a 2-drop and a protection spell in the same turn.
Kind of the break point in game 1s anyway is that Feather itself does have 4 toughness. And with the absence of Lava Coils in Zan's main deck, that can be problematic, often taking 2 burn spells, but it's just a little late, a little mopey. It's tough for these Naya Feather decks to get traction against these mono red decks.
Yeah, I agree completely. And no, Lava Coil's main deck is the correct choice, especially in a field like this where you see a lot of different Esper decks, a lot of Simic Nexus decks. You can't really afford to play a card like Lava Coil in your main deck.
So Zan's going to cash in that Fanatical Firebrand, get a Light Up the Stage going, reveals a couple of 1-mana spells. That's what you love to see when you have that Runaway Steamkin in play. Here comes another Gitu Lava Runner. Here's a Shock, and Zan's going to have a think about what exactly he wants to do with that.
Yeah, this is a tough spot. We saw this a lot during Theros block when Blue-White Heroic was a deck, and it's always so scary. It's like these creatures start out as 2/2s, but there are so many different ways to throw off the combat math, especially in the Naya decks, base Boros decks, whatever. And 1 burn spell almost certainly is just not going to cut it. So Zan, kind of in a tight spot, flooding out a little bit. The Light Up the Stage definitely helps a lot, but this combat step likely will not be going very well for him.
So I think that's Defiant Strike, right? Is that
Yes.
Is that the 1-mana spell we're dealing with here? That's +1/0, draw a card for 1 white mana. Obviously in conjunction with Feather, which you see on your screen there. That's an extremely powerful effect. After that, though, Zan is going to go ahead and fire off that Shock, but look what it is. Giant Growth coming down, but Zan has the answer. It's another Lightning Strike, and that's going to clean out that 10th District Legionnaire.
Nice. Yeah, I thought that this combat was going to be pretty bad for Zan. It was fairly obvious that Daniel had access to 2 different tricks, but
Zan had it all.
Yeah, the Shock and the Lightning Strike. But, I mean, now Zan's out of gas. What he has is what he has.
And Daniel's going to take a couple scries here due to that 10th District Legionnaire's ability. See if he can find a threat that can stick on the battlefield. Another big threat in Daniel's deck, Aurelia. That could come down and do some blocking.
Aurelia might be one of the most underplayed cards.
Yeah, you know, I messed around with Feather decks quite a bit early on in this format. It was a card that I had 2 copies of initially, and it always impressed. It was very game-breaking. Here's an interesting ad from Daniel's deck. Swiftblade Vindicator. This is a card we have not seen much in Standard. It is a 1/1 double strike Vigilance Trample for red-white.
Yeah, mostly double strike. And obviously the trample helps a little bit too. When you're adding Collision Colossus into these decks,
Yep.
Swiftblade Vindicator among the best targets that you can possibly have.
Yeah, tough to play this card in a world of shocks. You have to really work for it.
Not only shock, Goblin Chain Whirler.
Yeah. Very impactful cards. Daniel thinking about a block here. Zan with only 1 card in hand. There you see Swiftblade Vindicator on your screen. Are going to have a block. And it is going to be Defiant Strike again, attempting to give this Vindicator +1/0 and draw a card. Is it going to resolve? Looks like the answer is yes. So we're going to take a card off the top.
So at this point, I think you can conclude that Zan doesn't have a burn spell in hand.
Yep.
Likely doesn't have a Goblin Chain Whirler because he would have played that pre-combat.
Agreed.
And Zan is just trying to do what he can, get aggressive, get in these points, hopefully peel a couple burn spells to actually close out the game.
And look at this off the top. It's Aurelia. That's going to give that Swiftblade Vindicator +2/0. It's going to rumble in for some damage, and now Zan's kind of under some pressure here. He's going to have to find a way to win this game in the next couple turns, or Aurelia's just going to close the deal.
Yeah, he's under a lot of pressure, and Aurelia just provides this giant body for blocking. So he basically has to draw spell.
Yeah, and nothing there from Zan. Just going to pass the turn back. Daniel has Gideon Blackblade. I bet that's giving something lifelink.
And a Sheltering Light off the top for Daniel, too, which means that...
totally safe.
Yeah, he has complete impunity this turn. Can gain as much life as he wants, set up a kill next turn, pad his life total, and I don't think there's really anything that Zan can do. If he still had the Runaway Steamkin, it is possible that in combination with the Experimental Frenzy, he could get a little something going, but that's it.
Zan's just going to scoop him up. That game turned on a dime, and it's strange. Nothing really went wrong for Zan in that game. I mean, maybe a land too many, but it just seemed like Naya Feather had the cards that lined up in the particular situations, was able to finally establish some battlefield presence and close out the game very quickly with the help of Aurelia.
Yeah, I think Zan just flooded out a little bit and had the Steamkin on turn 4 when, if he had it on turn 2, the game is just completely different.
Yeah. Why don't we look at the sideboards for the players here? You see Daniel Garmon. He's working with 4 Cindervines, 3 Reckless Rage, 2 Vine Mare.
Nice.
2 Legion Warbust. Vine Mare criminally underplayed in this format. 2 Deafening Clarion, 1 Healing Grace.
Love it.
And 1 Aurelia Exemplar of Justice. Jerry, what are you doing here if you're Daniel?
You almost certainly want the Reckless Rages to deal with things like Runaway Steamkin and Goblin Chain Whirler, and the Feather decks just have so many good targets for Reckless Rage, it's almost like it doesn't even have a downside. And then you could make the case for something like Vine Mare because it has hexproof, but I don't really think that this is the matchup where you want it necessarily. Deafening Clarion seems like a nice card to have because it's going to stunt the early development from the mono red deck, and especially when you're on the draw, I think it's going to be huge. Healing Grace has to be there
for this matchup.
Specifically for this matchup, and then Aurelia is another great card because of the 5 toughness.
Healing Grace, 1 white instant, prevent the next 3 damage that would be dealt to any target this turn by a source of your choice. You gain 3 life.
Haven't seen much of this card in Standard. We did see it pop up a little bit at the Mythic Invitational because of the Duo Standard format and the fact that it was the cheapest conceivable card that you could tutor for against Mono Red with something like Mastermind's Acquisition.
Yeah.
But that's it. Very fringe use for this card. That's it.
Yeah, this is the first time I remember seeing it here in our feature match area, to be sure. Meanwhile, over on Zan's side, you were looking at 4 Lava Coil, 3 Legion Warboss, 3 Experimental Frenzy, 2 Tybalt Rakish Instigator, not Investigator, it turns out.
He's been demoted.
Yeah, I guess so. 2 Rekindling Phoenix and 1 Chandra Fire Artisan. Jerry, what do you like here from Zan?
Love the lava coils. I think Zan's plan is to try and keep Garmon's board clear, not let him get any traction, and basically just strand all of those pump spells in his hand. So the lava coils definitely help with that. And even if he gets a turn with like the 10th district thingy, the red-white 2-drop.
Yep.
And grows it a little bit, lava coil can still handle it. And to that end, I think he also wants the Legion War Bosses to go along with that removal plan, just because Legion War Boss by itself is a huge threat.
Do you think he can transition into kind of a control role and just try and kill absolutely everything Daniel plays and then like take control of the game with Experimental Frenzy at some point?
I think so. I do think that Zan is going to look for some sort of top end. I don't know if it's going to be Frenzy or even just Rekindling Phoenix because it's a good blocker, good attacker. You can make a case for Chandra Fire Artisan too. The problem is that Experimental Frenzy is just a little unpredictable. You don't necessarily know what is going to happen, and I don't know. I think you do want some sort of bigger card advantage-y thing. So maybe you just have to use Frenzy, but it might not work out for you the way that you want it to.
It'll be interesting to see how it plays out. Another thing I'm really interested in seeing playing out, it's the SCG Con, and I'm going to be there.
Me too.
I'm very excited. And of course, if you want to be there with us, you need to be playing those Invitational qualifiers. That's the best way to get qualified for the SCG Invitational at the SCG Con. Of course, there's exclusive prizes. $1,000 to that top 8, you get the qualification to the Invitational. SCG points are on the line. You see how important those are in this race for the Players' Championship. Also, there's that beautiful playmat for the top 8, and you can get some of those brand spanking new personality tokens. You and I have been retired, Jerry. Our shift as personality tokens is over, but great new ones are available right now. You want to pick up the Benny Smith clones or the Ben Friedmans, Shaheen Sarani, Ari Locks, and of course Sheldon Menery, the godfather of EDH. All those cards are available now at these Invitational qualifiers. Make sure you go check those out. go.starcitygames.com/IQ.
Our watch has ended.
Yeah. Look, the time of the squirrel is coming, Jerry.
One of these days. I think Mero just got a question regarding squirrels on his Tumblr that said the future is bright for squirrels or something.
He was taking questions at Magic Fest London.
Yes.
And he stated that all the squirrel haters at WotC have left over the past few years.
I didn't know there were squirrel haters.
Apparently, I don't see how. Squirrels are adorable, but they're gone now. And now Mero is free to institute the reign of the squirrels once more, and I am so incredibly happy. I'm here for it. Let's make those squirrels happen.
Bringing back the nut collector.
Sure. So many great squirrels. Squirrel Nest. Maybe Opposition's coming back.
No,
who knows?
Stop.
Not a fan of Squirrel Nest Opposition?
Squirrel Nest was already kind of busted. Opposition is just completely miserable.
It really is. You think Simic Nexus is bad? Go back to the days of Opposition.
Opposition was worse,
Yes.
somehow. I don't know how.
It really was.
They still make the occasional mistake and make these cards that are not very fun and don't promote very good gameplay, but Opposition was just like kind of
worst.
I think Stasis was the OG, right?
Yeah.
But
that's like not even like they just had no. They was like, here's a card. Maybe it does stuff. They had no concept of what they were even doing back then.
I mean, at the time when Stasis was released, you didn't have things like Gush and Thwart, and yeah, you had to make do with like Despotic Scepter and crap like that. So.
Yeah. Nice 2-drop here from Zan. Runaway Steamkin.
It's a good one. Like I said, Zan's plan is to keep the battlefield clear and meanwhile be hitting with a big threat. So Runaway Steamkin, Legion War Boss, those are going to be the 2 key cards, I think.
Nothing going for Daniel yet. Just going to play some tap lands.
I think this is pretty normal. Against the red deck, you just want to deploy a 2-drop and have access to a protection spell if you have that luxury. You don't always, but Zan's start is a little bit on the slow side.
Yeah, no 1-drop. Still, here's a Viashino Pyromancer, and that's going to buff that Runaway Steamkin. Daniel falls to 16. Turn heads back to Daniel. Can he muster on this critical 3rd turn? See a Swiftblade in hand.
Ooh, see a Deafening Clarion.
Ooh, even better. Even better. That's going to clear Zan's board. Back to square one for Zan Syed. What does he have as a follow-up? Now it's the time of the 1-drop. It's Fanatical Firebrand. Not the best time for that card to show up. And then just land past. So it feels like the pressure rapidly fading from Zan.
Yeah, not great. Zan likely has a bunch of removal spells in hand, which is fine. Might be able to buy a little bit more time, but really needs something big to capitalize here.
Daniel's considering his options here. 2 mana tapped. So it's going to be a 10th District Legionnaire. Card, of course, with haste. Does Daniel just want to get aggressive right off the bat? He does. He's reaching for it, and it's tapped and attacking. 2 damage heading Zan's way. No pump here, just going to fall to 18, and Daniel passes the turn over to Zan.
Yeah, just keep it up for protection.
Zan takes a draw. 4 cards in hand now for Zan. Going to attack with that Fanatical Firebrand. Plays a 5th land and just passes the turn back.
So even if Zan has 3 spells in hand, he's looking at 5 land and 6 spells, which is definitely not the ideal ratio for mono red. You see a lot of players this weekend playing 18, 19 land mono red decks. So basically a 50-50 split. Not great.
And this is certainly one of the most powerful versions of mono red we've seen in quite some time, but still your margins are small. A little bit of flood can really doom you.
Yeah, especially when you're drawing some of the weaker cards in the deck like Fanatical Firebrand. You already got 2-for-1s from a Deafening Clarion.
Zan with 19 lands this weekend, so still on the lower end of land counts. We've seen up to 21, I think. Seen as low as 18. Here's that Firebrand. 1 more damage. Both players kind of just staring each other down right now, seeing who will blink first.
Yeah, no one really wants to make a move, but Garmon currently behind in the damage race, but is winning the exchange here.
Here's Lava Coil, and it's so hard to picture this spell actually doing its intended purpose. Like, how does this work out for Zan, given the fact that Daniel's hand is just loaded right now, tons of mana available. And here's Giant Growth. Zan's going to read Giant Growth. Not a card we see a lot these days.
Zan, you know what Giant Growth does. It got cast last game.
Never hurts to double check, Jerry.
The text has not changed in 25 years.
Maybe he's just picking up and reminiscing fondly. He's like, Giant Growth, simpler times. But it is going to thwart that Lava Coil, get Daniel a scry, get a counter on that 10th District Legionnaire, and Zan just has to pass the turn back. Not where Zan wants to be in this matchup at all. And Daniel still with 4 cards in hand. 1 land, 3 spells, it looks like.
Yeah, thinking about firing off a spell on his upkeep here to get that scry.
Right.
Maybe find some more action.
Reckless Rage he's working with in hand. I think that's the one he's debating on. Draws a land. Just going to attack with that Legionnaire 1 more time. Zan falling to 13.
Both players being very careful, which I love.
Tap land for Daniel. Passes the turn back to Zan. 3 cards in hand for Zan. Takes a draw. What did he find? We're going to try it again. Lava Coil 1 more time. What does Daniel have in response? Looks like we're going to start with a Defiant Strike. Zan's going to respond to that.
Fireworks on this turn.
He lets it resolve.
I lied. No fireworks.
Well, I think there's just no way Zan wins a firefight there. Like, it's not in his best interest to get into that exchange. He needs to hope this was just like, I need to cycle my Defiant Strike, and this Lava Coil actually works.
He also doesn't have to respond to the Defiant Strike because currently the Lava Coil is still going to kill it.
Right. Right, exactly.
But now if Zan has something like a Lightning Strike, it's out of range of that. Unless you want to actually cash in the Fanatical Firebrand as well.
Right, and I think that's what Zan's thinking about. But like Lightning Striking there doesn't do anything either. He just plays this Sheltering Light in response.
Well, he found that off the Defiant Strike, though.
Oh, did he?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
And granted, Zan doesn't know that, right?
Okay. Yeah, I guess you're minimizing options there by taking that line. I think it's high risk, high reward. That's how I would define it. That Sheltering Light is going to resolve, though.
Daniel keeps the Scry on top again.
That's got to be scary.
Does not bode well for Zan.
Here's an attack from that Firebrand one more time. Daniel falling to 12. And Zan passes the turn back. Still 3 cards in hand. One of them does appear to be a Lightning Strike. And here's Aurelia. That's a big-time play from Daniel Garmon.
Again, threatening 2-turn lethal here.
Yep. Plus 2-0 Vigilance and Trample headed over to that 10th District Legionnaire.
Boros definitely one of the guilds that has been underperforming a little bit. And I think when Guilds of Ravnica came out, you anticipated that this guild would be mostly about the mentor mechanic, right?
Right.
And now you get a card like 10th District Legionnaire that incentivizes you to play all of these spells that target your creatures, and obviously Feather plays into that a lot too. And now it's like, oh, okay, like Boros is finally doing a thing. It is a deck that is playable in the format. Definitely not what we would have expected, though.
Right. It's interesting that Boros has underperformed in part because both mono red and mono white were so good.
Yeah. Yeah, kind of weird.
Yeah. So Zan does have a response to this Aurelia. He's going to try and combine Lightning Strike plus Shock, and man, is this susceptible to a blowout. I think Zan has to do it, though. He just can't beat this Aurelia. It's not going to get better for him if he lets it stay on the battlefield. Does Daniel have a response here? It looks like it. He's reaching for mana. But no, there goes Aurelia into the bin.
Well, Daniel just sitting on the Vindicator and a Reckless Rage.
Yeah. So here comes that Legionnaire. And he says now is the time for Reckless Rage. I think that's as much about the Scry as anything else, quite frankly.
Well, it also frees up the Vindicator to come down and not immediately die to the Firebrand.
Mm-hmm.
So you're running the risk of walking into a Chain Whirler or whatever, but at this point, you have a 6/6 on the battlefield, and Daniel is trying to set up a lethal attack next turn.
Yep, and Daniel's all in. His hand is on the battlefield. Zan does know he kept one on top, though. Likely to be a good card. Here's a Shock, so able to take care of that Vindicator. What's the top card for Daniel? Here's an attack. Here's a Giant Growth, and that is going to do it. Daniel Garmon with the help of classic Giant Growths.
Giant Growth for lethal, just like in Brian Gottlieb's basement in 1995.